Welcome back. This isn't the best news of all. We've got bad news, actually. It's not even the slightest of good.
Yeah, we are currently working on our site work right now. We'll release a full video on the whole driveway and stump removal process, but while we had the equipment here, thought it would be a good idea to get our perk test done since we have to dig a few holes for it. So the first stage of that is actually called the probe, where it's literally just you dig a 7-foot hole, or 2 7-foot holes about 70 feet apart, just so that the septic inspector can examine the soil layers and determine your limiting zone, or how far the effluent from your septic system can go down in the ground before it's not being filtered by soil anymore. So we dug our first pit where we thought we wanted it, kind of behind the house, hit some rock, probably about 3 foot down, and he gave us 3 foot 36 inches of limiting zone, which is enough for a sand mound system, which is not ideal. They're about twice the cost of conventional, and they're kind of an eyesore too. They can be like 5 foot tall out of the ground, so you really don't want one, but beggars can't be choosers, I guess. However, when we dug the second pit 70 foot on the contour of the land this way, we dug up some big time rock, and I'm talking big. This rock we're sitting on is actually the biggest one the septic inspector had ever seen come out of a perk hole. And the only reason we could even get this out is because we have a 25-ton excavator here that was doing the septic holes, just because we had it here for digging up stumps. So usually they just take little backhoes or mini X's to do these pits, and they're only this wide, but we have a 4-foot bucket on the excavator, and it was able to pull this rock out, which is like basically the footprint of a small car. So we might be able to use this for a back porch or something, but in short, a site with that much rock and that large of rock is just not suitable for a septic system of any type. And so basically we failed. We failed our septic test. So the next steps from that are a little bit more unknown and more uncertain. So we were stressing about that a little bit, and
Cried a little bit.
I almost cried.
I cried.
So basically it's like, if you can't have a septic system, you can't have a house. So it essentially renders the property useless. Now, of course, we could have gotten this done before we purchased the property, but we got such a good deal on it, and we knew that there was money in logs, that we decided to move forward without a perk test. And it would have also been really tough to envision where we wanted the house while the trees were still up, and even harder to imagine where we wanted the septic system with all the trees still up. So
yeah, because where you get your septic test is where the septic system is. So you really have to figure out exactly where your house is going to be, where your well is going to be, because it has to be 100 foot from your well, and it has to be on a downward slope from the well. Well, ideally, right? I don't know if it has to be.
It doesn't have to be. It depends on the system.
Better, yeah.
But in short, where these 2 pits get dug, your septic system goes in between, and there's no more negotiating after it's done. So basically, the next challenge here is finding a suitable septic site on our property. And the hard part is, though, we can't use the edge of this clearing anymore. We've basically explored that. It's not going to work. We have to go downhill into the dense woods and figure out a spot with 2 pits that don't have rock in them, or rock outcroppings in between them. And of course, there are rocks sticking out of the ground on this property. We're up on top of a hill. I mean, there's a lot of rock up here.
Yeah.
As you go down the hill, the soil gets a little bit more mature, and you start getting deeper soil.
Yeah, we actually heard that someone down the hill was building, and they dug up a rock the size of a school bus. So
yeah, that's not good.
It's just a rocky area in general. But yeah, our next step is we are digging. Well, we already dug several pits elsewhere on the property. The sewage enforcement officer will come back next Wednesday, and hopefully some of the pits that we have dug are suitable. If they are not, we keep digging.
Yeah.
We don't really have an option. We are luckily we have 6 acres, so we have a decent amount of land to explore, but we don't want to dig super far from the house, because then that means more trenching and just more logistics and more trees that have to come down likely. So,
and more cost in general.
Yeah, like money, cha-ching, like that's all I hear. But honestly, yeah, we are hoping for the best.
Yep. So
and that's all we can do.
right. So today and yesterday I trudged through the woods for a good while and marked a few sites. We ended up digging 5 holes yesterday. One had rocks the size of this end, so we just filled it in immediately. But the other 4 are big holes that we dug with the big machine back in the woods, which was a story in itself, getting that thing back and through the trees. And so we left those pits open, and then today I marked out 3 more that are actually a different direction down the hill, and Travis dug them with his mini excavator, so the holes aren't as big, but they were a lot more promising. The dirt dug much easier. There wasn't these gigantic rocks coming out of them, just normal sized rocks, and he was able to get down to actually 7 foot deep, which is what they want to see on one of the 3 holes that he dug. So I'm really hoping that at least some of these holes might be a suitable site and where we can put our septic.
Yeah, so stay tuned. We will have more news next Wednesday, and we'll definitely share that. But fingers crossed, everything works out.
Sharing the good and the bad. I mean, this is, just one of the many challenges I'm sure we're going to be facing on this, but this is a really important one, like really important. We need to make sure we can have a suitable septic site on this property. So I'm standing in one of the holes that was dug with the big machine, and you can kind of get an idea of what's going on here. So the really dark stuff is topsoil. You might have between 3 and 8 inches of it where we are here. Some places you have several feet of topsoil, which is great. That's where all the microorganisms are. And then you get into your subsoil, which doesn't have as many microorganisms in it. And basically the septic inspector is looking for where you start hitting a more impermeable layer. And for us, it's coarse fragmented rock. And this pit, this looks similar to the very first pit we dug, which he gave us 36 inches of limiting zone, which is probably about down to here until you start getting the really big rock. So that is good enough for a sand mound. You need like 20-ish minimum for a sand mound. The deeper limiting zone you can go, the smaller your sand mound can be. And let's take a look at the other ones for some comparison. This is the corresponding pit for the one we were just at, and you can see it's pretty similar. A few inches of topsoil, some coarse rock mixed in the first couple feet of soil, and then you get down to some harder stuff at the bottom. Again, it's going to be up to the SEO what we can do and if we can use this hole or not. If not, it just gets filled back in with my skid steer. So this is the best septic hole that we dug. Travis just dug it today with his mini, and we actually got a full 7+ feet on this pretty easily. And you can tell there's a substantial difference in the dirt that came out of this hole than there is any of those. There's none of those monstrous rocks that came out of here. The side walls of this hole look much smoother, and I think this is a pretty likely candidate for where our septic's actually going to be. This is basically right behind me is our right of way coming up the hill, so you might be able to see it a little bit if it's sideways, but I think this is actually a pretty good spot. Of course, this is just the probe test, the first half of the septic test. After we've established 2 pits that have decent enough soil type, the inspector will come back, dig 6 post holes in between, and that's when the actual percolation test happens, where they put the water in the hole and see how long it takes to absorb into the ground. But that's our current status right now. I appreciate you following along. Of course, we're going to be sharing the good and the bad throughout this whole journey, so make sure to like and subscribe if you'd like to follow along. And again, thanks for watching.